am Dr. Dyan Haspel-Johnson, and it's time for a weekly sleep tip. So I've been talking recently about grief and sleep and also self-hypnosis. And in this series, which I think is so important, I feel like there's not a lot of discussion about grief, particularly as it pertains to sleep. I think a lot of people know that when they're experiencing grief, that it's hard to sleep often, or that people don't want to get out of bed, and which can be a sign of depression. And so how do you cope with that? I mean, first of all, I think that if you're having those kinds of experiences, it's really wise to find someone to help you and talk to you. I know a lot of times it's hard with friends or loved ones that it's hard for them to see you suffering or know what to say to you. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with watching people suffer, of course, and watching loved ones grieving, and they don't know what to say and they don't know what to do. And that, I think, can make us, when we are grieving, feel really even more alone, which is really hard. So I would suggest that if this is going on for a while for you, that you find someone. There are a lot of helplines and there are a lot of resources out there, therapists and groups and things like that, and that might be helpful to you. But I also think that it might be helpful to just have an awareness that I think a lot of people, when they're experiencing grief or a loss, also experience some fear of sleep or of rest, or even without the experience of grief, they experience a fear of sleep because of a fear of death, a fear of not being present, a fear of not being in control. And we don't always think about it in those terms, but I think that the grief experience is a feeling of being out of control, of the unknown. And sometimes people feel that way also then about resting or about sleeping or about living their lives. I mean, it can go either way. So I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge that. I think it can be helpful to understand that some of this process of working with our grief is about that fear of letting go, and also that fear of being obliterated, or of the connection to the loved one or the experience or the hope or the dream or whatever it is that you're grieving, that fear of it being gone. And so recognizing that this is a transitional state and allowing yourself to play with the edges of that. And by that, what I mean by that is, when we're experiencing grief, it's very obvious and easy to focus on the sadness and on the fear or on the anxiety of how am I going to go on without that thing or that person who is lost. And I think that it can also be helpful to orient ourselves to the sense of awareness of the value of that person, that being, that experience, and that now we are here to carry that torch forward. So what I have found when I've lost loved ones in particular, or have moved from a place, or have experienced grief and loss, is I start to be curious, what is it that this loved one, this experience, this hope, this dream taught me? And now it's like I'm being trusted to carry that forward and incorporate it into my life and live with that resource. I experienced grief in the loss of one of my sisters, and it was a very shocking and profound loss for me years ago. And I knew how much I loved her and valued her, but it was only once she was gone that I began to understand some of the additional things that she had taught me and that made me who I was. One of those things being the kind of therapist I am, the kind of practitioner I am, the way that I teach people self-hypnosis for sleep and for other things, And that a lot of that came from my relationship with her and how I trusted her and how she trusted me as her big sister, and that was very meaningful. And I realized that only once she was physically gone, and so I allowed myself the space for that grief. But I also did have a fear for a while that I was going to lose her because I'd lost her in the body, that I was going to lose some of the memories, I was going to lose some of the connection. And when I made space and stopped being so afraid of this, I realized that it was impossible to lose that connection, that I am who I am because of and in the context of that relationship. And so I was able to let go of some of the control, which of course I didn't have anyway, and I was able to then experience this connection in a different way and to carry it forward with an honoring. And so I think that was very helpful, and that helped me to rest in the trust that the grief actually brought me an understanding of something so valuable about who she was and what our connection was. And that helped me to move through some of that grief and loss and to integrate it in a different way. And that's one of the reasons why I love self-hypnosis. A lot of times I found that I was more able to do that and be at peace when I was in my self-hypnotic state. So if it's something that you're interested in learning more about, you can go to my website. There are a lot of videos and blogs about self-hypnosis, and they're free, and you can read them. It's at www.drdyan.com. It's DRDYAN.com. And there's also, of course, you can get the Deep and Easy Sleep Self-Hypnosis package, which teaches self-hypnosis specifically for sleep. And feel free to put some comments here if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer that and support you as best I can. And again, you can also find some resources, some therapists, and some communities that can help with the grief, and just an awareness about this fear of moving too far into it, and transforming that to knowing that through grief we can actually find more connection and more validation of that connection to that which we have lost, which is not in fact lost. Then we find it. I hope this is helpful. Okay.